Okay, welcome to the Mattz and Tash Paranormal Podcast.
Episode Dose.
Episode 2. Yes. Today we're talking about simulation hypothesis, or simulation theory. It's based on the Holographic Universe idea. It basically is the idea that we are living in a computer.
Simulation.
Yeah, one big simulation. And it's kind of a tough idea or theory to wrap your head around, but it makes the most sense as far as the physicists and all the smart people are concerned. Even the head guy at Google, apparently. This first video we're going to watch is called God Science, Episode 1. If you YouTube just God Science, this is the first thing that comes up. It looks like they just started this channel, and I'm actually quite excited for it because they've picked this as their first episode, and some really good information. It's nothing too special. I mean, they just basically take and compile a bunch of stuff from other important videos and stuff out there, and then they actually made a really cool thumbnail, and that I think that a lot of times will pull you in. Just a good thumbnail.
Yeah, it's so true. I never click on anything that doesn't look cool or 80s.
So even the beginning is actually hilarious, and they definitely go into like, yeah, here we go. They got a sweet like intro. You would
Yeah,
think
we're hooked already.
You would think it was on like primetime television, but no, just jacked off YouTube. Bunch of compiled stuff. Here's the Matrix.
Keanu.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves.
Have you ever had a dream, Leo, that you were so sure was real? What if you were unable to wake from that dream? How would you know the difference between the dream world and the real world?
What if you woke up one day and discovered that everything you've always taken for granted is not what it seems at all? What you thought was reality is actually a simulation.
They're showing Wizard of Oz right now.
Complex, sophisticated illusion.
And now we're into like time lapses of
even solid
Earth.
matter itself
Yeah.
is no more real than, say, a rock that you would pick up in a dream. And not only are you living in a simulation, but it's being generated by a system that you can contact with your mind and actually change the simulation itself. In effect, hacking the universe.
I don't like
What
that.
would you do to change the world?
What would you do?
I don't like that.
Recent scientific discoveries are strongly suggesting that this is the case, that we live inside a simulation, and that
Whoa.
we, as observers, have a demonstrable power over it. We are actually participating in the creation of the reality that we live in. Wait, what? Are we really living in a simulation?
Simulation?
Well, this is the conclusion that physicists and cosmologists have been coming to.
So anyway, yeah, that's the intro to this video, and it's really kind of funny how they set it up. But basically, the idea is that everything is actually created within your mind. So everything that you're experiencing out there is actually not out there. It's actually created.
It's a simulation in your mind.
You're in a simulation.
Right.
Which isn't part of a bigger system that we are all connected to. So I'm guessing maybe everybody's running their own simulation of what is real, and they have the power to create, I guess, however they're feeling or however their life is going. That's what gets reflected in the simulation. So if you're, that's where the law of attraction comes in, and the secret, and all that good stuff. So those types of people with that sort of new age idea, using science to back it up, they love that idea. And I kind of do too, actually. The Matrix is one of those movies that completely demonstrates this idea of a simulation. The idea in the Matrix is, they're 3,000 or whatever years into the future. The Earth has been overhauled. The machines have taken over. There's a whole backstory about how the machines, robots, took over hundreds and I think thousands even of years. So they basically took over, and this is the future of humanity living out their lives in a computer simulation. And the idea in the Matrix is that as they run these simulations, they're generating power, and so basically they're used like as batteries for the Sentinels or computers.
I haven't watched that movie in a long time.
I know, you almost have to
But,
watch it a few
yeah, I
times
kinda
to
wanna
really,
watch it again,
to
but
really get it.
I do remember that like they download skills.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like they get hooked up to this machine and then they
Well, everything in the Matrix is just that, exactly that. It's
Yeah.
the Matrix, so you're able to. That's why Neo is able to do what he can do in the Matrix, is
Yeah.
because he understands what it is, and he's no longer tricked by it.
yeah,
so
yeah.
he knows it's a computer simulation, and it's just ones and zeros, digital code,
Yeah.
and he can break the laws of nature by flying and all that jazz.
Bending,
Bending time, moving,
Yeah.
dodging bullets,
dodging bullets.
that sort of
Yeah.
thing, saving lives.
the spoon thing.
Yeah, which brings me to my next point. Maybe I can find it here in the video. Okay.
Good. But is there any solid evidence of computer programming in nature? It seems there is. Theoretical physicist James Gates has actually found computer code hidden deeply in the equations that describe supersymmetry.
So you're saying as you dig
This is
deep,
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
you find computer code writ in the fabric of the cosmos.
Into the equations that we want to use to describe the cosmos, yes.
Computer code.
Computer code, strings of bits of ones and zeros.
Love his hair.
Yeah.
It's not just sort of resembles computer code. You're saying it is computer code.
It's not even just is computer code, it's a special kind of computer code that was invented by a scientist named Claude Shannon in the 1940s.
Okay, so they found computer code within the bits of matter and the cosmos.
Okay, but why did he just say it was invented by Claude Shannon?
Well, that's the thing that really blows people's minds. Now, I'm going to go off on a tangent here on a bit of a rant. So this is a bit of an idea that I got after watching this is, what if people from the future got so good at running simulations like Second Life, video game, VR,
Love Second Life.
stuff like that, and it just got so good to the point where, we're starting to do 3D printing now. Think about, 500 years from now, maybe we can create actual matter with nanotechnology and actually create real space and things inside of it. So then they get so advanced that maybe they want to create different simulations that are different eras of time, maybe different possibilities, and they run these simulations to travel through time, to visit different times to see what it would be like, B, to see how different cultures with different programs embedded react to their societies and grow as society. Maybe they want to see how their future is going to end up being. Maybe they, they could predict their own future by looking at a simulation that maybe they could speed up. And I saw that in an episode of, was it Stargate or something? But anyway, you basically speed up the evolution so that you can predict your own evolution by doing these simulations. And I mean, that's just a far off crackpot theory,
so too much
but
for
think
me.
about that. I mean, we could be just one simulation of billions and billions of simulations.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get into John Titor, which is that's a whole nother podcast that we should actually do one on. But John Titor was someone that supposedly claimed that he was from the future, and he was coming back to 1974 to steal a certain chip or computer code from an IBM lab or something to take back to the future because it was very important to his time and his reality.
Why in the future? Why wouldn't he take it back? Why wouldn't he be from the past coming into the future to take.
I'm not too
something
sure. So,
that doesn't make
but the
sense.
weird thing is he started blogging in 2000, and then he disappeared, and then he popped up again. Some people think it's John Haber, a guy in Florida who's kind of really into computers and stuff. There's some links, but what if a guy like that went back in time one time just to steal the code from, say, someone like 1944 dude who created this, and then built on that in the future to create simulations, and that's why we find it here now. It's because we're just a simulation that was made by this guy's code. That's the only kind of logical explanation I can come up with that. And so anyway, I just wanted to go on a rant about that. But yeah, let's see what they say next. I think they go into some Matrix stuff here.
So are you saying we're all just, there's some entity that programmed the universe and we're just expressions of their code?
Consider the fact of a maximum speed in nature, the speed of light. In 2011, scientists reported neutrinos traveling faster than the speed of light. But those findings were retracted when it was discovered that equipment used in the experiment was faulty. Nothing has ever been seen to travel faster than the speed of light. Nature has a maximum speed, and events in a virtual world would also obey a maximum speed.
This guy
since they would
narrating
be
is pretty
limited by
funny,
a
eh?
finite processor.
Just boring.
There's also the curving of space by massive objects and time.
But I kind of like it. It's
dilations.
just monotone.
It's kind of like a lullaby.
Yeah, it was like putting me to sleep like every night when I was trying to watch this.
Yeah.
But I got
you
through
said
it.
that like it took you a really long time.
A high processing demand, such that massive objects would
So he's
slow
talking
down
about,
the information
a big
processing of
computer with,
space-time, similar to the way that high data demands
just
in a
so much
computer
processing
also
speed
processes.
that a computer basically would, have the power to run, a real life, a reality or timeline. And then they go into identical parts of like how and why it resembles, I think, a computer or quantum. Everything's just like, quantum entanglement. Non-locality is another thing that you can talk about, which is basically, particles not even being particles, they're waves of potential. And they could exist anywhere at any time. They kind of do exist at anywhere at any time until there's an observer, and then they pop into a location. So there's a non-locality side to them, which you also get entanglement.
Kind of like if the tree falls in the forest and nobody's there, can you hear it?
Exactly.
Kind of
yeah.
like that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there has to be an observer for something
For
to
it
be
to
experienced.
exist or whatever.
Experience, yeah, because everything's data or consciousness, and
Yeah.
that's what a NASA physicist, Tom Campbell, actually gets into a lot. So that's happened to you before, where you've thought of something that you haven't thought of in a long time,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden it comes up again and again,
Yeah.
without you realizing it.
Yeah, and you're like, weird coincidence.
Yeah, that
Maybe
happened to
not.
me the other day. I was thinking about a movie. I think it was Powder, and then
I love that movie.
and then I was listening to a podcast, and I think it was on Joe Rogan, and the guy on there kind of spilt the beans about the director being this like child sex offender, and the whole
What?
movie is about some sort of
What?
child sex cult teachings. But anyway, we won't get it.
What?
We won't get into that.
You're gonna have to tell me about that later.
But anyways, check it out. It's on that podcast.
That's like a childhood favorite of mine.
I think I own that movie too. Yeah.
God,
Somewhere.
so good.
So yeah, and then so here's Tom Campbell. He's a super smart dude. If you want to check some cool shit out, just listen to him talk. I ended up listening to like a 6-hour lecture on of him just talking about this kind of stuff. And when you do hear it from his perspective, it really does make you take it seriously.
And as we evolve,
Because he's a NASA
evolve
physicist. He's
means
not effing around.
He's not
It
effing
means
around.
Spiritual growth. It means growing up.
This is his job.
It
He
means
studies
getting
this
rid of
shit.
Fear, ego, belief, and expectation. It means lowering the entropy of your consciousness. That's what I mean by growing up, evolving. We are a unit of consciousness, and our job is to evolve the quality of that consciousness. Now, when you get rid of this fear and belief, what are you left with? What are you without that? Your love. That's what's left over.
What?
So he's got a really good message because he's advocating for the love frequency, basically the high entropy of life. So he's saying if you take, a group of people and if they build on those values, they will build more. They will be more creative as a culture and as a society. And then the ones that are like selfish and burn your neighbor's barn down type thing will just be destruction. And then he kind of alludes to the fact that we're mostly in the bad
one.
realm right now. It's like, I think he makes a joke like, what does that sound like? But yeah, so if that's any kind of proof right there to, work together, it all comes down to, I guess, everyone personally and what they believe, because everybody has their own perspective on life. One thing they come across in this other video, in the workshop, the Holographic Universe workshop, there's 5 parts. They're all like an hour to 2 hours long. But anyway, there was one part in it where it talks about Brad Pitt, and you've heard of like people being like, when they see somebody and they're like, oh, that looks just like Brad Pitt or whatever, and then another person would be like, that doesn't look anything like Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
So it's just showing like the different perception of and perspectives of different people. We are all living our own sort of thick dream that is really no different than a sleeping dream or an idea or thought. We're just in a more materialized simulation. That's the idea. And when you start thinking like that, then it's, you start thinking of everything out there as being a reflection of what's going on in here. And if you change what's in here, you should see a difference out there. And I mean, that's a common teaching that I think everybody should learn. But it's not black and white. There's a lot of gray area, and you're not always going to see results or see exactly what you want to see. In this other one, or in that same workshop, they talk about infinite I, which would be some, I don't know, I guess God or your higher self. And they talk about how, you can think these things all you want, but you need to trust in that your infinite I is giving you the experiences that you need at the time. So everything is fate and meant to be, and a learning experience for life, and evolving you as a spirit and as a soul, or as a reflection of your infinite I on this one of many infinite realities, which you get into multiverse theory too, ties into the holographic universe. And if we're just one simulation, maybe different simulations would solve the idea of multiverse theory, or at least supports it.
Too much.
What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have any. What was the one I was telling you I was watching last night? The Holographic Universe?
Yeah,
Holographic Universe.
Yeah, see, it's really confusing because there's the Holographic Universe, the 56-minute version, which is like an old 80s like science video.
Yeah.
Which is really weird. It's got great music. I'm pretty sure there was like a very hard religious angle.
I think there was too.
They cut it out. I remember seeing it. It was sort of alluding to the fact that like, well, if there is a creator, then there has to be a God.
That's the thing. They started talking about like the creator.
Yeah.
And then I started getting weirded out.
Infinite I is the same kind of idea.
Yeah.
But it's all perspective on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
They really talk about some events and different things that are happening as being part of just, your journey and not to fight it.
I guess all of these different theories have the same sort of beginning where they're saying, I think that they all believe there's like some sort of creator, right? Whether it's like a computer code or
Yeah. They can always boil it down
whatever
to
it
some sort
is.
of
Yeah.
religious faith, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is tied into spirituality for sure. And I think a lot of people, they're making that connection because it does have a lot of scientific basis, even though it is like completely out there, weird, into the unknown type stuff. At the quantum level, things are weird.
Mm-hmm.
Like, time doesn't really exist the way it does at this level. Things, like I said, have non-locality. They could pop in and out at any time. That's the idea with the double slit experiment. Anyways.
Yeah.
And
When something's observing, things happen or don't happen.
yeah. So
depending.
anyway, to get back to my other point, I was just going to say that, yeah, it's confusing with these videos because there's the Holographic Universe, the 56-minute version, and then there's the Holographic Universe, the 5-part workshop, which are all like an hour to 2 hours long. And then there's a Holographic Universe, which is a 5-part. They're all like 10 minutes long. Somebody compiled all the 5 parts and put them into one, the 56-minute version.
Yeah, instead of like 56
So when I'm
hours.
talking about the 5-part workshop, I'm talking about the long one that are like 2 to 4 hours. So anyway, it does get a little confusing. I suggest just kind of watching them all. It's a lot of the same content, but when you get through them, it's good to watch it again because it's really heavy stuff, honestly. But it is true. I mean, it's they're finding more and more data, more and more evidence to support these theories. And when they first came up with it, the scientists that did, they got laughed at. And now they're not laughing anymore. It's taken very seriously because they keep finding more and more evidence of this idea. And yeah,
That's how it goes, though. People think, back in the day, the world was flat. And the ones that were saying it was round got laughed at.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. And in that documentary, I think he alludes to that idea. So yeah, that's exactly it.
You never know.
Let's get into the double slit experiment. If you don't know what the double slit experiment is, I suggest you check it out. Basically,
It's a pretty trippy
highly
thing.
suggest you check it out because it's just crazy. If you check out
If you YouTube
What
it.
the Bleep Do We Know, which is another documentary that everybody should watch. There's a different animation. I know you're thinking of the Dr. Quantum one.
Yeah.
And that's a good one too, and everybody should check that one out. But this one actually is a different one, and
Influencing the experiment?
I really like the
Consciousness
animation that
is
comes in.
Information.
It
You
looks
would.
it looks a lot like, or it really drives the point home.
In 1978, physicist John Wheeler proposed a new way of doing the double slit experiment that might finally reveal what's really happening. He proposed what is called the delayed choice experiment, in which the decision of whether or not to observe the particles isn't made until after they've gone through the slits, but before they've impacted the detector. This animation is highly simplified, but you get the idea.
The music.
I know.
Here
So
comes
epic.
the light. It travels through the double slit barrier as waves.
So this is part of the
Waves
God
pass the
Science,
slits,
episode
haven't
1.
yet hit the detector, and here comes the scientist.
So
His eyes are closed.
as the observer
He's
comes
delaying
in,
his choice to make this an observed experiment, and then
He opens his eyes.
the waves turn into particles, and reality is created. Yeah, this shot is awesome with
What
the monkey.
the...
But here's the thing. I'm just
Planet
going to
of the
pause it
Apes.
there. Here's the thing. So they run the experiment and found that when they're not looking, it goes through the slits as waves. When they are looking, it goes through the slits as particles. So this guy's idea was we're going to delay looking at it and then check the slits. And then so that opened up a whole nother can of worms. And I'll tell you why. It's because time doesn't matter. If those particles get observed and change here, that means they change in the past, in the future, across the board. And that is another mind blower right there because Tom Campbell, he gets into this, and he has a whole bunch of experiments to kind of like with letters and stuff, checking letters, burning letters. It's like if it doesn't exist and wasn't observed, then it's not part of this reality.
The results of the experiment didn't solve the mystery. Instead, it got even stranger.
Just stranger.
God.
Because what was found was that at the moment of decision to observe, the waves became particles. And not only that, but they actually made a record of themselves as having traveled through the slits as particles. Yes, you heard me. Deciding to run the
Why did he have to
observed
say that?
experiment causes the waves to become particles, and this causal force extends backwards in time.
Our choice of
Backwards in time.
experiment to do determines the prior state of the electron.
Running the experiment unobserved does not cause this effect.
I don't even understand
The
that.
observer effect.
When John Wheeler first proposed...
So, that's kind of a crazy idea. And I just, if you watch the other video, which I think you checked out last night,
Yeah.
did you get as far, I'm talking about the holographic Universe 56-minute version.
I think I finished it.
Yeah? Did you see the part with the bird and the light?
I don't know.
Did that part not blow your mind? With the idea that...
Oh, yeah, I did see that. I know what you're talking about.
Basically... our brain is just decoding electrical signals that are being imported from our eyeballs. We don't actually see things as what they are. We decode electrical signals, and then we create those things within our brains. So we don't actually see with our eyes. We see with our brains.
We're interpreting the electrical signals in our brains.
Exactly, and same with audio. As
Yeah.
we hear things, we are taking those electrical signals, decoding them as music or sounds, and then our brains is realizing, okay, I'm podcasting right now, I'm talking.
Yeah, and then that's
I
what
can
we're
hear
hearing.
that. So if you cut off the signals, that's where we get into if a tree falls in the forest, do you really hear it? Because it's like, if you cut off the signals, does that mean that the transmission is still not being transmitted, But anyway, the idea that light doesn't really exist because inside your mind, inside your brain, it's always dark. But yet we see in our imaginations, with our eyeballs, a big, vivid landscape of daylight, But in reality, there's no light inside your brain where these pictures are being created.
Mm-hmm.
And being put together from the electrical signals being decoded. So the double slit experiment supports that idea because it's saying that everything's just a holographic wave, part of the hologram, which is basically waves, and then as we observe them, they turn into particles. And if you have ever seen The Truman Show, it's kind of that idea. And we get into what I call stage theory, or the idea that nothing else exists unless you're observing it. So it goes into some deep, deep theories that you've probably thought of, just on your own, and then it supports those things. So it's very interesting if you have thought of those theories on your own, and then you're like, oh, wow, this kind of makes sense. Make sense.
Yeah, and another thing I found interesting in that documentary was they talked about if they took your brain out of you and they hooked it up to a computer and simulated, something else going on.
The electrical signals that you think are real life.
Your brain would
right?
think, like say it simulated that it was, a different human being, or it was like at a desk, I think is what the example that it had, like in your office or whatever.
Yeah.
But this brain is actually just sitting in who knows where,
a glass
right?
box.
A glass box.
Hooked up to a computer.
Hooked up to a computer, but it doesn't know the difference. It thinks that it's doing its office job.
Yeah, and that's the Matrix idea.
Yeah.
People living in the Matrix, they don't realize that they're, and it's just like if the people in Second Life in the virtual reality, do they know that they're in a virtual reality, and do they know that you know, some of these other, I've heard some other guys refer to the Big Bang as maybe a startup on a computer.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe when you're playing Second Life or The Sims, that's a whole other reality that we're controlling.
Yeah.
And those are real, actual real little beings.
And they're living their life. So there's some footage that they, I think, put into some of these documentaries they take and, you know, to drive that point home. There's lots of different little theories that get supported by this idea. And I think that's why it's so popular.
The world of perceptions we live within our minds.
The music,
Yeah.
the graphics. It's so 80s.
It reminds me of like those old YTV
To
shorts.
imagine matter to have an
Or like a
existence
video that you
outside
would
the
watch
mind
in
is
school,
indeed
like
a
science
Yeah.
or something. But
The
anyway,
perceptions we observe may well be coming from an artificial source.
artificial
It is
source, like a
possible
computer.
to see this in the mind's eye by an example. First, let us suppose that we could take our brain out of our body and keep it alive in a glass jar.
This will be the
Let
future,
us put a computer in
Yeah.
which
Singularity.
all kinds of information can be recorded. Finally, let us transmit the electrical signals of all the data related to a setting, such as image, sound, and smell. to
Which we
this
already
computer.
do with video games.
Let us
and
connect
movies.
this computer to the sensory centers in our brain with electrodes and send the pre-recorded data to our brain. As our brain perceives these signals, it will see and live the setting correlated with these. From this computer, we can send to our brain also signals pertaining to our own image. For instance, we can send to our brain the electrical correlates of such senses as sight, hearing, and touch that we perceive
The
as
five
we sit
senses.
at the desk. In that state, our brain would think itself as a businessman sitting in his office. This imaginary world would continue as long as the stimulations keep coming from the computer. We would never realize that we only consist of a brain. It is indeed very easy for us to be deceived into believing perceptions without any material correlates to be real. This is just what happens in our dreams.
Exactly.
Then they get to talking about what is a dream and what's reality, right? And when you
Yeah,
wake up from
yeah.
your dream, how do you know you're not just in a bigger dream?
Exactly. They get into light, yeah, like we were talking about, how that doesn't really exist because it's just electrical signals in your brain. It's not actually out there. It's within you.
Yeah, there was one part that I kind of liked too when they were talking about when you're, like, say if you're a kid with a telescope, you know, like looking out at the sky, but you think it's like thousands and millions of miles away, but it's actually not. It's so close that it's inside of your brain.
It's actually at the back of your brain. 'Cause
Yeah.
That's where you come up with the visuals and how is that any different than the mind's eye where you have imaginations or thoughts or, you know, like, is it all just part of a different simulation on a different level?
Yeah.
You know? So anyway, it's a really, really interesting theory, and I love getting people's take on it.
We've been taught that the process of seeing is when light clusters, called photons, travel
Okay,
from
this
an
is more
object
of
to
the
eye
electrical signals
and
entering
pass
our
through
brain.
the eye, where they are refracted and focused on the retina at the back of the eye.
We're all just lenses, no different than a
Here,
camera.
these light rays are turned into electrical
Intaking
signals
information.
and transmitted by neurons to the center of vision at the back of the brain. We now know that the opposite is true, that the act of seeing actually takes place in this center in the brain.
The visual cortex.
All the images we view in our lives and all the events we experience are actually experienced in this tiny and dark place. Both the film you are now watching and the boundless landscape you see when you gaze at the horizon actually fit into this place of a few cubic centimeters.
I can't handle that. It's too much.
That's a mind blower
That's
right
too
there.
much.
Yeah.
I don't
These
like it.
physical facts make us come to an indisputable conclusion. Everything we see,
This-
touch, hear,
This
and
guy is
perceive
so
as
about
matter
it.
He is, yeah.
is only electrical signals in our brain.
I mean, yeah, it's grain of salt. You know, it's you take it for what it's worth. We don't really know. It's theory. And if you don't want to think about it, you know, you don't have
Then
to.
you don't.
But I, for one, do like thinking about it because I just find I always look at the positive side of things, I guess, and thinking that I do have control over my reality and that this is maybe just one reality of many simulations or alternate parallel universes, however you want to call it. You know, it gives you a lot of power, maybe.
Or I feel
to
like
do things.
you'd take it the other way and go insane and like self-destruct.
It's a very
quit
fine
your
line.
job, like jump off
Yeah,
a bridge, like
yeah.
do all the things that.
You have to have a very expanded mind capacity to be able to
And control.
hold this idea and
Not lose
accept it without, you know, going crazy.
Yeah.
So
I'd be the one that goes crazy.
I totally understand that. But I, for one, really like it. It's a cool idea, and the advancements in computers that are happening at a rapid pace
Every day.
It wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me either.
And I think it would be a great way for time travel to become real as well. You know, it's a way for people to experience different eras of time, like I was saying earlier. You know, that's sort of the main reason I would think that one would come up with this sort of plan. But I mean, think about what we're doing already. We're running testing on animals and small ants. You know, we're just ones and zeros to them. We're not important, so they can do whatever they want. You know, and maybe that's why we have this 1% of billionaires that are just having a great time, because they came from a different reality
Oh my
and they're
God.
just you know, taking advantage
Having
of
a heyday.
our matrix. Yeah. I think we could maybe wrap it up there. I think I've touched on all the things I want to. I mean, obviously there is so much that we haven't touched on, and I really encourage everybody to do their own research. You know, we might have to do another podcast on this topic because there's just so much that I probably didn't touch on that later I'm going to be like, oh shit, I should have mentioned that. But I think that's enough for our audience to soak in for a while.
Yeah.
And then maybe they'll be that much more up to speed when we do touch on the topic again. We'd like to get some ideas from anyone. If anybody would like us to tackle any topics, leave some comments in the YouTube comments section or on the SoundCloud. We will check the comments and give us a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll have the links for you. Remember, life is just an illusion.
You're just a sim.
Exactly.
Comments nala.